What if the most powerful man on Earth is also the most misunderstood? Not misunderstood by the media, not misunderstood by his critics, misunderstood by himself. You've seen the headlines, the rockets, the tweets, the billions, the chaos. But here's what nobody talks about. Behind every company he built, behind every bold decision he made, behind every empire that shouldn't have existed, there was a boy who didn't know how to stop. And that boy never left. Most of us look at Elon Musk and feel one of two things: inspiration or irritation. But both reactions are missing the real story. Because the truth about Elon Musk isn't about money, it isn't about genius. It's about what happens when a human mind is pushed so far past its limits that it rewires itself just to survive. You've felt pressure before. You felt like the world didn't understand you. You've stayed up at night running through problems that nobody else could see. Imagine that feeling, but multiply it by 1,000, and then tell yourself failure is not an option. That's the world Elon lives in every single day. Psychologists who study extreme achievers have a name for people like him. They call them missionary founders. Not mercenaries building companies for money, but missionaries obsessed with a mission so big it consumes everything around it. But here's where it gets deeper. The same psychological profile that drives someone to colonize Mars is the same profile that makes them almost impossible to be close to. The clinical term is called hyper-focused cognition, the ability to block out everything irrelevant and go all in on one single goal. It's a superpower, but it comes at a price. The mind that can hold a vision of humanity's future often can't hold space for a simple conversation. The person who can solve energy crises struggles to explain why he missed dinner again. That is the paradox of Elon Musk's mind. Let's go back to the beginning. Not the Silicon Valley beginning, not the PayPal beginning, the real beginning. Pretoria, South Africa, 1980s. A quiet, strange little boy sitting alone in a library, reading encyclopedias, not for class, not because his parents told him to, but because the world inside those books felt more real to him than the world outside. He read so much that by age 9, he had finished the entire Encyclopedia Britannica, both volumes. His classmates didn't understand him. His teachers found him odd, and the kids at school, they bullied him brutally. There's a story that most people gloss over. When Elon was around 12, a group of boys threw him down a flight of stairs. They beat him so badly he ended up in the hospital. Let that land for a second. The man who would one day launch humans into orbit once lay broken at the bottom of a staircase. But here's the part that reveals everything about who he became. He didn't ask for protection. He didn't transfer schools. He went back and he learned to fight. Not because he loved violence, but because he made a decision that would define the rest of his life. He decided that the world would never make him feel powerless again. Now fast forward, Canada, then America, then Silicon Valley. Elon arrives with almost nothing. He's sleeping on couches, showering at the YMCA, eating less than $1 a day in food. But watch what his mind is doing during this time. While most young men in that situation are focused on survival, Elon is writing down a list, a literal list, the 5 problems he believed were most important to solve for the future of humanity. The internet, clean energy, space colonization, artificial intelligence, rewriting the human genome. Not goals for next year, goals for his lifetime. Not for wealth, for civilization. This is not normal behavior. This is the behavior of a mind operating on a completely different frequency. And it worked. Zip2, PayPal, Tesla, SpaceX, Neuralink, The Boring Company, X. Each one of those companies was built not because the market demanded it, but because a voice in his head said, "This has to exist." But now comes the part of the story that the highlight reels always skip. 2008. Tesla is hemorrhaging money. The Roadster is years behind schedule. Investors are pulling out. The company is weeks away from bankruptcy.
At the same time, SpaceX has just watched its third rocket fail on launch. 3 rockets, 3 failures. All of his personal fortune poured into that program. Gone. And at the same time, his first marriage is collapsing. Everything falling apart at once. Most people would have walked away. Any rational person would have said, "I tried, it didn't work." But something unusual happens inside Elon Musk's psychology at this moment. He doesn't shut down, he accelerates. He takes the last $12 million he has left and he splits it between Tesla and SpaceX. His exact words to his team, "If we don't do this, both companies die, so we do this." No hesitation, no safety net, just forward. That decision defies every rule of financial logic, every rule of self-preservation, but it worked. SpaceX launched its 4th rocket successfully. Tesla secured emergency funding, and the rest of history rewrote itself. But here's the hidden truth, the part nobody wants to say out loud. Elon Musk has spoken publicly about being on the autism spectrum, specifically Asperger's syndrome. And when you understand what that actually means, suddenly everything about him makes sense in a completely different way. Asperger's is associated with a deep, almost compulsive focus on systems and patterns, difficulty reading social cues, intense emotional sensitivity underneath a surface that looks cold. Think about that. The man the world reads as emotionless, as robotic, as ruthless, is potentially one of the most emotionally overwhelming minds on the planet. He just processes it differently. He once said in an interview that he finds parties and casual conversation genuinely painful, not boring, painful. While he is standing in a room full of people laughing and talking, his mind is somewhere in the atmosphere calculating orbital trajectories. He is always, always operating alone inside his own head. Even in a crowd, even surrounded by people who love him, that is an extraordinarily lonely way to exist. And yet, he keeps going. There's another piece of this puzzle that most documentaries completely ignore: the relationship between Elon Musk and his father, Elon Musk. Elon has described his father as a man who was skilled at making people feel small, a man who delivered cruelty with a calm voice. He has said publicly, and this is almost painful to hear, "My father was not a good person. He has this almost omnidirectional evil." That is not the language of a man who has healed from his childhood. That is the language of a wound that never fully closed. And here's what psychology tells us about people who grow up in that kind of environment. Some of them collapse. They spend their lives searching for approval they'll never find. Others build. They take every time they were told they were nothing and they turn it into fuel. They construct monuments so enormous that the voice of the person who doubted them gets buried under the noise of achievement. Every rocket Elon has launched carried more than fuel. It carried something he's been trying to prove since he was a quiet, strange boy in a South African library. Now let's talk about what this all means for you. Because Elon Musk is extreme, his resources are extreme, his circumstances are extreme, but the pattern underneath his story, you've seen it before. Not in billionaires, in people you know, maybe in yourself. The person who cannot stop working because stillness feels dangerous. The person who builds and builds but never feels like it's enough. The person who is wildly successful by every external measure but privately wonders why they still feel empty. That is not just Elon's story. That is one of the most common human stories ever told. Psychologists call it achievement as avoidance.
using the relentless pursuit of goals to avoid sitting with pain that was never processed. The mission becomes the medicine, but the wound underneath stays open. What separates Elon Musk from most people isn't that he's smarter. There are thousands of people with equal or greater raw intelligence who never built anything like this. What separates him is tolerance for pain. His mind has an almost inhuman ability to stay inside discomfort, to look at a problem that would break most people and say, "I will outlast this." That is not a gift from birth. That was forged in a staircase in Pretoria, in a marriage that fell apart, in 3 failed rocket launches, in sleeping on couches at 24 while writing down plans to reach Mars. Resilience isn't built in comfort, it's built in the exact moments when everything is telling you to stop. And Elon Musk has never stopped. So here's the question this story leaves you with. What would you build if you stopped being afraid of how much it might cost you? Not financially, emotionally. What would you pursue if you accepted that the road would be brutal, the doubt would be constant, and failure would visit you more than once? Because the most extraordinary minds in history weren't people who never struggled. They were people who made a private agreement with themselves that the dream was worth more than the comfort. Elon Musk is not a perfect human. He is a deeply complicated one. But inside that complication is a truth that applies to every single one of us. You are more capable than your fear allows you to believe. The question is whether you'll ever give yourself the chance to find out. If this kind of deep psychological storytelling moves you, subscribe, because this channel exists for one reason only: to help you understand how extraordinary people really think. Not the version they show the world, the real version, the one underneath.